Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again with another video talking about my favorite topic, Cisco Secure Access or just SASE in general. Today we're going to talk about resources. This is kind of the next step in your deployment. You can't really do anything from a policy perspective if you don't have resources, right? And now you have resources or internet resources and private resources. The internet resources are basically like categories or destination lists. If you're used to Umbrella, you know what those are. But the private resources are for inbound things like, hey, a FTP server, a web server, maybe an SQL database, stuff like that. It's really important to understand that this is the evolution. Like I said, this is Umbrella 2.0. So a little bit better than that. Let me give it more justice. It's more than Umbrella, but this piece right here is basically the critical piece of Cisco Secure Access. This is what allows you to tie your entire environment and have agility between, going out to the public and getting to resources wherever you are in the world. Private resources are how you're going to get there and secure access. So again, D Cloud Edition. Once I get the actual console, we'll get into a deep dive and I'll explain it a little bit more, but I can at least tell you exactly what private resources are. So again, it's telling me to click on private resources. So we're going to click on this private resource here. Pretty much these are the resources you can actually get. So let me go over these here. So registered networks are pretty much your, networks to your servers, right? So these registered networks are going to be public IPs. So same thing in Umbrella. You would give it a public IP. If you want to point your public IP to Umbrella, that's what you would do. Internal networks are your internal networks, things that you want to you can actually use these in access policies as well. Roaming devices are just like they are. It's the same roaming devices that are on Umbrella. Internet and SASE resources, like I said, these are your destination lists for the internet, going to your internet so you can create rules based on these internet and SASE resources. And then last but not least is private resources, which is your internal applications that you could get through to ZTNA, browser base, or client base, RAVPN as a service, and the use case that most people don't use SASE for, but you can use it, is you can actually do site-to-site tunneling, or you can basically site-to-site tunneling through SASE. So you can basically create a way to go through another site to a branch site through Cisco Secure Access. Do I recommend you doing that? Probably not. You're probably better doing SD-WAN or just traditional route-based VPN tunnels to the branch site itself if you're not using SD-WAN. But this is a backup to say, hey, if for some odd reason you had an issue and you had to revert traffic and have that traffic go through secure access to get to the branch site, you technically can do that. So when we click private resources, these are all your private resources. Now, obviously you're going to click the add button, but I want to go ahead and explain this in a little bit more detail here. So you got private resource groups and you have private resources. They sound exactly what they are. So the private resources are your individual resources. The group is a group of private resources. So as you can see, the file servers and HR apps, you got this HQ server and IT. Then you have internal DNS, which is the network services, so DNS stuff. So when you want to allow RAVPN users the ability to use your internal DNS, you got to create an object for it. IPS test site, don't worry about that. Splunk, obviously that's an app. Now, the connection method, how are users going to access this resource? So there's VPN, which is your RAVPN as a service. Then there's client-based ZTNA. This is the module, right? This is not browser-based. So you have to have the ZTNA module to get there. Everything else is VPN, 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 VPN. That's fine. All right, most people are going to say you can get through VPN for most of the resources. You got your access by, obviously that's the count, the rules that they're involved in. So let's say file server is 2 rules right now, 2 rules, 2 rules, 3 rules, 3 rules. And then you have your total requests, meaning how many times somebody's trying to access that resource. So we're gonna hit the add button here. And here's the pivotal part. Here's the whole thing about resources. And I'm gonna go down this, right down the line. So you give your private resource a name, obviously. Then this is the part where I was telling you about doing ZTNA, which is highly important here. So this internal reachable address, it could be an IP address or it could be an FQDN. If you do an IP address, you lose all ability to do ZTNA. because it needs to be a FQDN in order for you to do that. So the protocols in here, it's going to be TCP, UDP, any TCP port, any UDP port. TCP is going to automatically go to HTTP or HTTPS. And then you can just, when you do any TCP, that's when you do things like RDP. So this is going to give you the FQDN, right? Now we're going to pick the protocol. As I said before, you got TCP, HTTP, HTTPS ports only, any TCP port, any UDP port, any TCP or any UDP port. Then you got to give it a port name. Give it the range, it's going to be 80. Now, you have to click this use internal DNS to resolve this domain. If you do not do that, if you don't click this, you will not be able to resolve this FQDN, and you have to use your internal DNS service to do this. Now, here's the zero trust part. So you have two ways to get there. Zero trust, which is going to be browser based, or module based, which is the ZTNA module, and then you have VPN connection, which is your RE-VPN. So we click trust. This is going to say browser-based connection. Now, if you see this client-based connection, you're going to have to type this into however you get there. Depending on what this is 80, so you'd have to go into your browser, type in, once you type in that URL, the ZTNA module is going to redirect you to your IDP to sign in. Well, it's going to redirect you to your site IDP in the module. And then once you sign in, it'll present you with the page. Sort of like what I showed you in my last FTD ZTNA firewall policy, something like that. Then you got browser base. So your browser base, basically, Cisco is going to supply you with a URL. So as you see, it's a demo, I think this is intranet, sorry. And then it gives you this long URL. Now, remember I told you you're going to have to manipulate this URL and to match your domain. So what you would do is if you had GoDaddy, you would create like a subdomain or subdirectory, and you would point it to this URL. So people won't go to this link because this is a very long link, and trying to get people to remember this is impossible. So you just say, hey, webserver.yourdomain.com actually redirects you to this. Validate application certificate. If you click this and your application doesn't have a publicly signed cert, they'll get an error. So you got to be very careful clicking that. Okay. So we get going to show you all this stuff since we're just going to do the demo. You pick HTTP, and then when you take off, since it's HTTP only, this is where it's going to uncheck this validate application certificate. If you do HTTPS, you're going to have that certificate signed by a public CA. Decrypt traffic. So this is for inbound decryption. Sort of like if you look at my videos in the FTD about ZTNA, about inbound decryption, this is the same thing. You're going to have to upload the certificate in the key in the secure access, and then it will allow you to decrypt that traffic and then have IPS and all that stuff check it for inbound decryption. Without this, secure access can't really see the traffic that's going through to your resource. So it's very important that if you want to do this, I would highly suggest you do decryption on the traffic so that you can run IPS and malware properly, so nothing's hiding behind that SSL tunnel. Resource group. This resource group is if you want to put it into a resource group with a bunch of other applications, which you can apply policy later to the group and not the individual resources. But it's very important that if you're going to create a resource group, they kind of have the same purpose or function to it. So this is going to be all employee apps that you create. And then that's done and you hit save. Now you have this demo intranet. I always get that word confused, right? So now you have this resource, and as you can see, it's in the group all employee apps, and you can get to it through client-based ZTNA or browser-based ZTNA. As you saw, we didn't check VPN, so RE-VPN users could not get to this without going. RE-VPN users can't get to this if they log into the VPN, because we're saying you can't get to this using VPN. You can only get to this resource using these two methods. So let's click on it there. And it gave us a little more detail. And when we click on it, as you can see, you'll see client base, browser base. How many requests? Was there a successful request? Was there blocked requests? Resource details, obviously, we just saw the resource details. The resource address, we're going to this internally reachable address is going to be the FQDN. The protocol is going to be HTTP or HTTPS. We got port 80. The DNS server that's going to be doing the resolution is going to be this internal DNS server. For client base that's already on, just type in whatever in the browser and the redirection will happen through the ZTNA module. If this was like someone that was a vendor or maybe someone you don't want to give RA VPN access, you would just say, hey, go to this website, and it will redirect them to this external IP address, which will say, hey, you need to sign into whatever IDP that, I want Azure or, Duo. What I technically would do is if you're going to do this for browser-based, make sure they're actually in Azure or Duo, because they'll just get into a login page and they'll say, well, I don't have a login for this. So they won't be able to actually get to the resource. And then VPN is blank because we didn't allow VPN connectivity. And then decryption is off. So there will be no inbound decryption. So you can't really tell what traffic is going there, and you can't do IPS. So the resource is technically not as protected as I would like. But, some people don't have the keys and they don't upload the keys, and they're just going to hope, which is not a good strategy, that someone doesn't do something to their resource, SQL injection, all those type of attacks that could technically happen if you don't have IPS technically looking at the resource. And then it's going to tell you, who was it accessed by. Now there's going to tell who was accessed by because you have to log in. So it'll give you a log saying, hey, who tried to access this application? Now you have visibility, right? Because normally you don't, normally I see most people don't have the visibility they need. This actually gives you great visibility into who's trying to access your internal applications. Because if I have to now identify myself before I actually get to the web GUI, it instantly tells me, hey, you tried to access this. So there's a level of accountability there, right? Then it tells you the associated rules. The rule name is all employee apps. And that's really all it is when it comes to private resources. So this is another building block of Cisco Secure Access. So we went over backhaul tunnels and resource connectors. That's the first thing, highly important. Then we went over how to import users into secure access. That's highly important. That's building block number 2. And now we have resources, which is building block number 3. You cannot do too much of anything without this here. Now there's other things, obviously, when we get into secure and you start looking at like security profiles, rules, and all that stuff, ACPs and stuff like that, that's where it ties those 2 to 3 building blocks. So when I say 2 to 3 building blocks, it doesn't really call the backhaul tunnel. Now you could technically create rules on those tunnels in your ACPs. Most people don't do that though. But users and resource groups and resources you're going to use those a lot in secure access, because that's ultimately going to control who gets access to what. If you are looking to get this in your environment, there's going to be a link in the description below so we can have a conversation about how to get you from no secure access to fully functional secure access, and you basically having one rule that controls all, right? So you'll have the visibility, you'll have the workforce or workforce agility. They'll be able to just go wherever they want, access resources wherever they are in the world. More productivity means more money, ultimately, for businesses, right? If they can do business anywhere in the world and be secure, they're going to make a lot of money for the business. So if you're looking to get this in your environment, definitely hit the link in the description below, and we can talk about getting you there. If you are a Cisco sales rep and you're looking to show people the value of Cisco Secure Access, and you need somebody to actually do like a POV or just help them, you already sold it and you need somebody to help them actually implement it, link in the description below. You can hit me up, send me an email. Let's talk and let's see how I can help you actually move the needle and get that client into something as great as secure access. This is Don from Padlock Technologies. Don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe on this video. I really hope this was informative. Like I said, I really like secure access, and I'm like a champion of Cisco Secure Access and just SASE in general. So I hope this video was informative. Thank you, and have a nice day.